what if there was a product that was a wireless transmitter, receiver, monitor, and recorder all built into one? That's today. The ATOM A5 HDMI wireless system, we're just going to call it A5 moving forward, is one of the most interesting products, and we'll kind of get into the reasons why. We're going to break this review down into 3 parts: unboxing, functionality, and then testing. For testing, we are going to look at 4 things. We are going to look at stability, we are going to look at range, we are going to look at latency, and we are going to look at image quality. Those are the things that we are going to be diving into on this. Chapter markers are below for everything, so if you're looking for a specific part of the video, you can skip ahead or go back and review other things. Without further ado, let's dive in. All right, opening it up, we have a semi-hard case. By the way, this comes in 2 configurations. You can get this in 1 monitor or a 2 monitor configuration. This is the 2 monitor configuration. You don't need both. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but if you want to have 2 monitors that are on the same channel using the same stuff, this would be the one that I would recommend. This is a semi-rigid hard case, meaning it's not quite a Pelican, but it is not a bag either. It does have good body to it, and it feels very well built. There are 2 compartments here. We can see that there's an upper chamber and a lower chamber, both zippered independently. I would imagine that the upper chamber is for accessories and the lower chamber is for our monitors. In the 2 monitor configuration, you are going to get 1 HDMI to HDMI type A, so full HDMI. It's a thin cable. It's about 1 foot long. Pretty good. I don't hate that. I do prefer thin HDMI cables over thick boys, just because they're easier to rig. Comes with 5 rabbit ear antenna, of course 4 for the monitors, and then an extra, of course, because rabbit ear antenna break all the time. So it's nice that it comes with an extra one. It has all of this kind of tactical packing, so as you build out more accessories, more cables, replacements, that stuff, there is a place for all of that to go here, which is great. And then over here in this zipper compartment, we have a monitor strap. This is for the second monitor. If you're going to have an AC or a director or somebody going to watch the video signal that you are sending them, it has a little 1/4-20 plug here at the bottom, which then goes into the monitor. There is a mini tripod. The mini tripod, we've seen a lot of things like this. It's made out of a composite material, feels pretty robust, but still lightweight, and has little rubber footing at the bottom, as well as a 1/4-20 at the top that has kind of that skid plate on it, or that kind of rubber pad on it to kind of work with friction and tension to hold on to your stuff. And then we have a monitor mount. This is all metal, feels very robust. We have a screw tighten for the pan. We have 1/4-20 at the bottom, 1/4-20 NATO rail on the side, and then of course the ball head on top. So that is cool there. Full disclosure, this did come with those tempered glass screen protectors. I put them on off stream. In the lower chamber, we then have the monitors, both of them. We have more of this tactical kind of packing stuff, which is great. Another zipper compartment. And in the zipper compartment, we have a QR code, which is for the A5 guidebook. So if you want to kind of learn the ins and outs and are not watching this video, that QR code will get you there. Leave that inside there. And then we have the monitors, again, with the screen protectors already on them. The reason, by the way, you can get this in 1 monitor or a 2 monitor configuration is because these monitors are identical. We're going to get a little more into this when we start testing this thing, but it is both a transmitter and a receiver, and you can just select through the menu structure which you want it to behave as, which is great because that means that this also then adapts into the existing Vaxis wireless system setups. So if you have already invested in a Vaxis wireless unit, like some of the ones that we have reviewed over there, this will then adopt into that. So you don't have to start over. We're gonna look at this monitor, but again, both of them are the same. All right, looking at the body, the first thing is that this is made out of some sort of composite material. It does not feel like it's made entirely out of metal. It is some sort of composite, except for when we get to the back plate. That said, the construction of this feels very good. It does not feel cheap. On the front, we have the touch screen. On the front of the touch screen, we have the tempered glass that I've already installed. On the bottom, we will start here. The first thing you will see is that we have a 1/4-20 mounting point, as well as 2 anti-rotation RE style pins. On one side here, we have HDMI in and out. We've talked many times about monitors needing to be looped through. You don't want to be stuck with something being the end of your video signal chain. That signal chain is important, especially when we're talking about a wireless video system. You want this to be pretty high up in your chain. So I would have this plugged directly into the camera and then run stuff off of that if you need EVF, if you need dummy monitor, other things like that. But if you only have the HDMI in, it has to be at the end of your signal chain, which means that it's not going to be as close to the camera as possible, which is going to give you more latency. So very, very smart that we have both in and out here. Underneath that, we have the headphone jack followed by a DC port in for powering it off of cable if you didn't want to power it off of the back. Before we get to the back, we'll look at the other side. The other side, we have a USB Type-C port and a micro SD card port with a micro SD A1 V10 in it. We'll talk about this, but these two additions to this could be quite cool, again, if this monitor does what it says it does. On the top, we have a power button. We have 2 antenna inputs here, as well as 3 programmable function buttons. I love having programmable function buttons. Touchscreens are great, but for things that I use a lot of, if I'm monitoring exposure, if I'm monitoring focus, I need to be able to get in and out of specific tools very, very quickly without needing to go through all of the menus that are built into touchscreens. So having the addition of physical buttons with our touchscreen, A+. I love that. On the back, we have 2 Sony L-style battery plates. This is a hot swappable device, meaning that I can have 2 batteries plugged into this. When one of them drains, it will use the second battery. I can then replace the first battery while the second battery is being used, have continuous power without having to power down my monitor. The ejection buttons are on the insides here, so if I were to take a nice big battery and put it down and in, you hear the snap. Love that. And then to eject it, I simply push this button down and pull it out like so. All right, let's get into this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rabbit ear antenna and I am going to screw this on. You don't need to death grip screw these, just put them on finger tight. You don't want them to be on so tight that they become difficult to undo. All right, with the batteries now connected here, we're going to go through the menu first, show all of the functionality of what this is capable of doing, then attach it to a camera, take it out in the field, and do all of the testing that we need to do with it. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to press and hold the power button. That is going to begin the boot up cycle, which is going to start by looking like this. This is the Vaxis logo, and this will just sit there as this boots up. Boot up time on this does take a while. I've got a little counter down there. You can see exactly how long before we then get to our main screen. So as you are booting up your system, just know that this takes time, that much time, to get to where we need to be. So this is not something we can just flip on and run, which is also one of the good things about this being hot swappable, is that it doesn't have to go down if you can just rotate out batteries. Looking at the menu as a whole, on the top here, we have a lock button. This is, of course, so we can either lock or unlock the touchscreen. So if we have things where we want them and we don't want to accidentally adjust or change them, we can lock the screen, unlock the screen, that kind of thing. Next to that is settings. Next to that is color. Color is important. We will go into that later. And then on the top right, we have a series of other buttons here. These are, of course, our kind of quick menu buttons. So we have things like scopes, which give us the ability for parade, waveform, histogram, or vector scopes. We get all of that kind of DIT level stuff. We, of course, can also adjust the opacity of that. Our next menu is what we call photos. This is where we kind of keep our overlays, so things like our frame ratios. So I can sit here, adjust the color, and then I can adjust my little aspect ratio overlays like such. I can even put in custom ones should I want to. But if you're going to be filming in one aspect ratio, like 16:9, but your final deliverables are in a separate aspect ratio, you can give yourself markers to help with framing. The next is our safe area. Again, how we want things to be framed inside of, how much or little safe we want for that. This is something primarily that gets used for TV, but if you're trying to keep important things in our frame, this is a way to do that. Anamorphic, we have de-squeezing available to us. So if I wanted to de-squeeze, I could, and I have the options between 133, 218, 165, and 15. So depending on what camera body and what lens you are using, you can adjust your de-squeeze factor here, again, to help with viewing. The next menu is focus. This is a little more than just focus. This is what I would kind of call focus and exposure, but we have 5 tools available to us in this. We have focus peaking, which is something that is your normal image, but when something is in focus, it kind of highlights it in one color. In this case, it's set to red, but you can change it to green, to blue, or to gray. And you can kind of see here where it says wireless video system, because that is tack sharp. You can see that line kind of showing up all over that. The next one we have is zoom. This is just to program it so you can pinch to zoom. So if you need to get quick reference focus, you can kind of pinch to zoom, check your focus really, really tight, pull it back out, and then of course be on your way. Next is zebras. If you have a photo background, should sound somewhat familiar. This is where you can take a certain portion of your image highlights. In this case, this is between 85% and 100%, and it will then give you kind of this marching ants in a diagonal line to let you know what is and is not blown out. False color. This is one of the single best tools for checking for exposure. If you don't know how false color works, it's not as scary as it sounds. I promise. We made a video up over here to kind of give you a basic breakdown of how false color works. This is absolutely the single best tool that I use when checking for exposure. So check that out if you have not yet. Monochrome just looks at one of your video channels. So this is going to be your red, your green, your blue, and then your grayscale or luminance values here. The next menu is color. This is for our monitor. This is where we can work with standard white balance, extreme white balance, or HDR, which is PQ or HLG. So depending on the video signal chain that you're working with and what your camera is outputting, we can then adjust our monitor to appropriately view whatever it is that we're looking at. The last and final piece up here is our signal. You can select whether you want the wireless video chain in this monitor to be a receiver or a transmitter. Right now, this is set to receiver. The other monitor is set to the transmitter, but we can switch that should we need to. Switching between being a transmitter or a receiver does require a full reboot. So if you select the opposite, right? So if it's on transmitter and you switch to receiver, like what we did, receiver to transmitter, it will fully boot down, and you will then have to boot it back up, which of course, as we've talked about, takes a little bit of time. But you can see here now at the bottom, it says that it is a transmitter and now functions as such, which is awesome. So no, you can absolutely switch, but it is going to take a little bit of time to power down, go through what it needs to do. You turn it back on to then switch that out. Next is under input. So because I am a transmitter right now, I have HDMI input as my option there. I can then sync this manually. I can sync this over HDMI, or I can sync this via timecode. So if you're working with multiple cameras, if you're working with audio and camera and you want to have everything in sync, you can either set it manually, you can send it through the video chain, or you can do it traditionally through timecode. Then under wireless settings here, again, all of these Vaxis things, this included, can transmit both to receivers as well as to smart devices, both Android and Apple devices. So here we have a QR code for easy pairing, as well as our SSID and password if you want to manually connect to the ad hoc Wi-Fi that this emits. Last one is just channel. It'll default to zeros. You can change out that channel if you're getting more interference depending on where you are, finding clean channels, and then of course doing that. But signal strength will be shown down here. Those are our functions across the top, across the bottom. Of course, it then tells us what our input is, which is HDMI. It tells us that we are on transmitter mode. It shows the signal strength that we have, what channel we're on, and then of course the video that we are working with, which in this case is nothing because there's nothing there. It also shows that we do have a micro SD card in there, as well as a record button. More on that in a second. Over here is a play button, corresponds to said button here for recording. Shows my battery levels in both of my batteries, and then of course my audio monitoring as well, all right here across the bottom. Finally, up over here in the corner, if we push the color button, I can load LUTs into this. Let me repeat, I can load LUTs into this monitor and save them in the monitor. So if you are working with a particular camera, or you know the general working LUT that you are going to be using, I can load up to 5 LUTs at a time directly into this quick select menu. So I can have LUTs in my system that I can use so I know what my footage will end up looking like, generally speaking, with a reference LUT there. I have an import and delete option here. You will import them via the micro SD card that you have loaded in there. It will then go through and find the LUTs. I can then put them in here, program them to which one that I want them to be. I can toggle this on and off there so I can apply the LUT or deselect the LUT for my viewing purposes. We have the settings button here. This is of course for our display setting, function, and system settings. I usually leave these on default, but if you do need to adjust these for any reason for the particular viewing style that you have, you absolutely can. And then you can really fine tune these should you need to calibrate your monitor for whatever reason. Going under settings, scanning mode, we have normal, we have underscan, the volume, the power of our backlight. This is going to be the brightness of the monitor, not this. This is the brightness of your image. This is the brightness of your monitor. Default, it's set to 50%. It goes much, much brighter, like that. Again, the brighter it is, the faster it'll burn through your batteries, but you do have that option if you find that viewing it outdoors can get tricky for you. You do have a lot more latitude there. Leave your scan mode on normal. Very rarely will you ever need underscan, but if you do have a camera that uses underscan, you can adjust that for that there. Under function, this is where I can set up my custom function buttons across the top here. And you'll see here, right now I have it set to false color, focus peaking, and LUT view. So I can toggle my LUTs with F3. I can turn on and off focus peaking here with my function 2. And then of course my false color with 1. I can adjust any of these to any one of the functions that this has should I want to. Then we go to system. System is language. This is of course the operating language that you would be using, what firmware version you are using, how you update the software, the factory settings, and then about Vaxis there as well. So that is the way that this functions from a menu standpoint. Okay, so now that we've gone over all of the kind of features of these monitors, I want to hook one up here to the Sony a7S III here to kind of give you a sense of what it would be like on camera. Now, mind you, there is no monitor mount for the camera that comes with this, so you're going to want to get your own. My favorite is this cold shoe mount here from 8sin. It is a really solid, well-built mount, works with this. It has a single screw point, which works for both the tilt and the tightening. And then of course it has this really large surface area here for the monitor itself. So I can attach that straight to this cage, slide that on there, put this guy here, tighten him down, like that. That's where the large surface area really comes into play. Tighten this down. I loop the HDMI around just once like so, and in like this. This now gives me a really nice, tight, compact setup that I have built in right here. You can see here, of course, this monitor can see, can you, maybe? What this one sees. So works really, really nicely. And then the plus side is that the shooter can be using this in log or viewing it in log to kind of get their general sense. But on the receiving monitor via this micro SD card, I have loaded in LUTs. So my preview LUT for your director or for your client or whatever, they can sit here and view what would be closer to a final image than just looking at the raw preview, which makes viewing this a lot easier. But in order to get a true test out of this, we need to go take this into the field and look at the range. How far apart can we get with this? Does it actually get us 600 feet of range? And finally, the last thing I want to look is recording on the receiver through the wireless signal. What does that video signal look like? Is it good enough to use, or is it just something that's fine for kind of instant playback? So without further ado, let's go to the field. Of course, this is like the windiest day we could be doing this. I know I'm a little underexposed, but we're working back there. So this is the distance test, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk toward that pine tree that's back over there. That's just over 600 feet away. And we're going to be recording here on the receiver. I've got the transmitter obviously hooked up to the Sony right there. I've got the Insta360, which is gonna follow me, and we're gonna see just how long I can go before I lose line of sight signal, and then of course how clean the image is. I have my rangefinder for golf in my pocket, which will then indicate kind of how far I am away. So without further ado, let's get walking. All right. So there's a pine tree all the way across the park from me that we're walking to here. I'm now all the way over here at the pine tree, which is over 600 feet at this point, and I still have good range. So I can barely see the camera. I'm all the way on the other side of the park, and it still shows when I'm facing the camera with direct line of sight that I have 3 bars of service, which is wild. So I'm gonna keep walking. I'm gonna pass this tree. I'm gonna walk all the way from one end of the park to the other, apparently. Let's just see how far away I am, because I feel like I'm pretty far right now. All right, turn this guy on. All right, so that's 275 yards away. So yeah, we're well over 600 feet at this point. Let's keep walking, because I'm curious. So yeah, again, little bit of glitching on the footage, a little bit of pixelation you can see. I mean, we're well outside of its advertised range, so that's not all that surprising. But I wanna go until signal drops. How far can I go? Like, I'm not in the park anymore. I'm on the street on the other side of the park. Okay, there we go. Now we're starting to really lose it. Okay, I've got this weird pixelation stuff. It's not really what I would consider to be a reliable image. If I turn around so my body's not blocking it, dang, we're still good. Okay, hold on, we're gonna keep moving. Body's blocking is a problem. So what happens if I move over here so I'm direct line of sight? I'm in somebody's yard again. Man, okay. So now I'm outside the park, I'm standing in somebody's yard, and I still have a pretty decent signal. It goes away if I turn my back to it, because obviously it's line of sight. But from here, let's get another read just to see how far we got. 320 yards? 320 yards, okay. Obviously they advertise this as being a 600 feet line of sight. I got almost 1,000 feet just in my own test from one side of the park to the other. We've been recording on this the whole time, so then that way you can actually kind of see the image quality. And in fact, for this, I didn't even record on the camera at all. So everything that you're seeing is just what's been on this monitor here, or the Insta360. So I think that even if you weren't under ideal circumstances, right, like this, there's no wireless congestion here, we're in a bright open park with my neighbors walking around, I think that you could comfortably get 600 feet line of sight. Now, one of the most important tests when we're talking about a wireless video transmission system is the latency. Latency is the delay between when something happens and when we see that thing happen on a monitor. This is the A5 that is set up for transmission. Next to this is the A5 set up as the receiver. So we are wirelessly transmitting all of, 6-7 inches from this monitor to that monitor. And next to this is my phone. Let us go into here. We will go to stopwatch, reset this. We're at zeros. You can see all the zeros here, and I'm going to push start. And we will then see just how much latency there is. It's kind of fun to see it cascade down through here. I'll go ahead and I will post the latency here. The last thing to keep in mind when we're talking about latency is that different cameras can generate different latency. Older cameras may have slower HDMI connections than newer cameras. So for me, I think the people who would benefit most from this are people who have invested in the Vaxis ecosystem, in their Atom system, because again, this is compatible with the rest of the larger Vaxis Atom ecosystem. I also think it's brilliant to have the monitor and the transmitter in one, having less things that require power, needing less cable, removing bulk. I think that the UI on this is intuitive and that it is strong. It does what it says it's going to do. I think the brightness is fine. It's not the brightest monitor I've ever used, but it's definitely not the dimmest. I was very impressed by the range of this thing. I think overall, this is a solid product. For who it's for, I think owner-operators will get great use out of this. I think people who are making the jump from just working solo to working with a team, I think that people who have clients on set or directors on set, I think that this is a fantastic option of getting you from kind of your starting point into that next tier. I think that this product does a good job. Pulling focus, I think you can do that on this system for things where there is little to no camera movement or very subtle human interaction and human movement. I think when you start doing things like action sequences and fight scenes and things, the latency is a little bit much for being able to pull accurate focus on something like that. But absolutely for a director's monitor, absolutely for a client monitor, and it can absolutely be an AC monitor in limited and certain circumstances. The other thing that really blew me away, of course, is the fact that the recorder in it does a fantastic job. Now, it's not going to give you all of the variable frame rates that you would have with your camera or all of the variable resolutions, but the fact that it is able to capture a full 1080p image at 60 frames per second is remarkable, especially considering the quality of the image that you get out of it. It's not ProRes, it is a compressed image, but it is far better than I thought it would be. And even when you're recording on the receiving end, right? So you have transmitter receiver, you can record it on either and or both. If you're recording it on the receiver end, that means that you're recording the signal through the wireless connection, and it's still fantastic, as we saw. So I think the product holds up, and I think it is worth the price that they are asking for it. So if you are looking for a monitor, if you are looking for a wireless transmission system, right? If you're trying to build out your kit further than you already have, I think that this makes perfect and total sense. Because while it is more expensive than some of the entry-level wireless transmission systems on the market, and while it is more expensive than some of the entry-level monitors on the market, the combination of the two puts it right in line with any of those products. And the feature set, the UI, the recording, the transmission, and the monitor all being built into one makes it a win for me. So with that said, as always, if you have not yet subscribed already, please do so. We do make more content like this and we'll continue to do so in the future. If you have requests of other things that you would like us to talk about, whether it's gear, theory, the business side of things, whatever you want, comment it down below. Let me know. I would love to make sure that I'm making content that you want to see. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode.